Welcome back to another Growing in Grace podcast. I mean, God bless you. We're glad that you've come to join us again for another Growing in Grace podcast. We're glad that you are with us. We would like for you to tell others that the Growing in Grace podcast is airing right now. Today we have a special guest with us, and our subject that we want to talk about with Terica Culver is family mental health, the do's and don'ts. The do's and don'ts when dealing with family mental health. Certainly, we oftentimes we have to consider that we all have health or mental conditions or situations or things that can arise. Everybody has certain levels of anxiety or different things that they begin to go through when they are dealing with different things in life. We all have to maintain a certain level of mental health. But sometimes it's not our own. Sometimes it's a family member that we are having to consider and contend with that may be impacting our health and the health of the whole family. So there's a whole dynamic to a family dynamic to mental health. And there are some things that we should do. There's some things that we shouldn't do. So Terica Culver is going to help us today navigate the do's and don'ts. So before we get into the do's and don'ts, when dealing with family mental health, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here. Thank God for this platform that we have to talk about mental health.
Yes.
Just a little bit about me. I'm Terica Culver. I am a licensed professional counselor.
Mm-hmm.
I've had the opportunity to work in this field for about 20 years, just working with all ages, starting with the age of 6 up until adulthood, with just about every type of mental health diagnosis there is.
Yes.
That's just my background. I find that it is rewarding to be able to help others see how to navigate life in a more functional way instead of being just caught up on the symptoms of their mental illness or their mental diagnosis. So that is what my goal is in life, to just really be able to reach people and to give them hope that, even though you may have this issue, it may not be curable, maybe something you may have to deal with your entire life, there is hope. There's a way to live a fulfilled life, even with these symptoms. So that's just a little bit about me and where I stand.
Yes. Well, I like that you brought up hope because that's a main part of what my goal is and my ministry is to bring hope to people, not just to tell people where they are, but tell people how they can live with and actually come to a better place.
Right.
Because sometimes you can't, the thing that you have or the position that you're in, you may not be able to change that position, but you sometimes can change your outlook and how you manage and deal with that position that you're in.
That's absolutely correct.
And
Absolutely.
so, you have a situation sometimes. So you said you dealt with some young people who actually may be having a diagnosis or being diagnosed. So they're 6, 7, 8, or in their early years, and there's a problem. How does a parent, or how do you involve the parents in dealing with that scenario? Or just tell me a little bit about the parents in that scenario dealing with that minor child.
Okay, so yeah, that's a really good question. So, of course, at the younger ages, the parents, they're very anxious and really seeking to find something. It's like, I need help for my child. I need help with this issue, with this problem, or whatever's going on. Because most of the times, parents really don't know, what's happening. They're just getting reports maybe from school, or they're seeing different things that just don't seem normal. And they're like, what do I do? So for parents, I think one of the main things they could do is just being able to provide that help and say, hey, I noticed something is not quite right.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do? Reach out and say, hey, are there any resources? Can you provide me with any type of help, whether it be therapy, whether it be just community activities, getting the child involved in developing social skills, whatever it may be, just sometimes just giving that parent the first step of
Mm-hmm.
what to do,
Mm-hmm.
where to go, and is this normal or is it not normal?
Uh-huh.
So that's one of the main things parents can do, just reaching out, asking questions and say, hey, this is what I see. Does my child need help? Can I get an evaluation? Can they get an assessment? What should I do? That's
Mm-hmm.
like one of the very first steps the parents can do, because it can be scary
Yeah.
when you hear that.
Yeah. So a parent, they don't know what's going on.
Hmm.
They just see behavior, and they're questioning whether it's normal or not.
Hmm.
So what's their first approach? Who should they be contacting first, just to find out, do we really have a problem or not?
Well, a lot of times what it is, the parent may notice the behaviors, and the child may go to school
Mm-hmm.
and they may get reports back, hey, this is happening, come get your child, and it's repeatedly. And so the counselor may say, hey, maybe you should reach out to this particular agency. So the parent can reach out to the school counselor.
Mm-hmm.
They can ask their pediatrician. They
Mm-hmm.
could say, hey, this is going on. What do you think about this? Do you have any resources?
Mm-hmm.
They can also just reach out to community resources like public health, the health department within their county. They could just call and say, hey, this is what I see. Do you have any resources? There's some access lines that parents can contact. They're not very easy to find, but that's why sometimes the community resources like school,
Mm-hmm.
some of the churches,
Mm-hmm.
just your pediatrician going to the doctor, they have resources as well, or just simply public health, your health department. Do you have any resources? And so once you get those resources, it's just taking that initiative, the parent taking that initiative to say, hey, I need to call, I need to see what the process is. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes parents are scared of even the process of
Yes.
getting started
Yes.
and think it's overwhelming. And it's like, no, just take it one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Start by getting the resources, and then we'll help you through the process of whatever is needed.
Yes, yes. So sometimes people are overwhelmed, and so you have parents
Absolutely.
that sometimes they'll see an issue and there's a behavior pattern, and how do, what if, I'm
Hmm.
gonna put it like this, because sometimes parents they'll write off the situation
Right.
like it's not there, it's not
Right.
happening.
Hmm.
They know something is happening, but then they don't want it to be happening,
Right.
so they'll act like it's not,
Exactly.
and they'll try to ignore
Hmm.
what's right in front of their face.
Absolutely.
What could you say to that parent that doesn't want to be proactive, is not seeking
Hmm.
the proper help? They just kind of want to ignore it and believe that the child will grow out of it.
Right.
They don't want to address
Absolutely.
what's going on.
Hmm.
They just want to ignore it and like it'll go away.
Right. Yeah.
What can you say to that parent?
Well, to that parent, and unfortunately, we do have situations where we deal with situations where the parent, they may be referred for services and they're like, I don't really think I need them, or I
Mm-hmm.
don't think my child needs them. So we just try to encourage them, hey, what is going on? You know, we let them know it's at your discretion.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't think it's happening, that's fine. But if the school is referring, just give us an opportunity to work with your child. If it's not something you want to continue doing,
Mm-hmm.
then we don't have to. But at least give it a try.
Right.
So, especially if they're being referred, but then when you, like you said, when you have that parent that's not getting the referrals and not being proactive, sometimes you just have to, it will take an adult from the community to say, hey, what are your thoughts on, your child being in services? Or have you noticed their behavior?
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about getting them some help?
Mm-hmm.
So it may take, another individual coming to that parent, say, hey, what are your thoughts on it?
Yes.
Do you need help with getting them started? Any barriers to getting started?
Mm-hmm.
Asking the question, what's your hold up? Why you won't take the initiative? You know,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it just takes a supportive family member or close friend to reach out to that parent
Yes.
to kind of encourage them. Hey, let's do something to help the child
Yes.
because it gets harder and harder the older we become. As we all know, the older we become, it's harder for us to learn new things and change our ways and do things differently. So it's
Mm-hmm.
the same thing with mental disorders.
Yes.
You just have to start early, and the earlier you start, they can learn the things they need to learn to change their thought process, to see it differently, to be able to function
Yes.
well
Mm-hmm.
in society.
Yes.
So that's the main thing, just having that support for the parent, somebody that can reach out to them and say, hey, what about this?
Yeah, and so sometimes you got a situation where your auntie, your
Mm-hmm.
uncle,
Mm-hmm.
your relative, and you're seeing the behavior, but then the parent looks like they ignore the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So how does a outside, well, they're a relative, but they're like an uncle or
Right.
aunt
Mm-hmm.
or a grandparent or something
Right.
like that, and you see there's something going on, but then the parent just like everything's fine with little Johnny, everything, my
Right.
little Johnny fine, my little Johnny okay, and,
Right.
and everybody around know
Right. Look,
there's
that's not
something
right.
wrong with little Johnny.
Exactly.
Everybody but the mom or the dad,
Exactly.
like they're in denial.
Mm-hmm.
How do you break the ice as a relative of the parent of little Johnny?
Well, I'm gonna be honest. It could be very hard
Hmm.
because it's going to take the parent realizing.
And excuse me, little Johnny.
Uh-huh.
I know somebody out there might be named Little Johnny. I don't mean no harm. That's just the first name that came to
Right,
mind. That's an
right.
example.
Just an example. Yes. So, for parents that are not willing to, don't really want to see it,
Hmm.
it's going to be hard to break that ice. So
Yeah.
we have to be real honest about reality. It's
Hmm.
going to be hard because little Johnny could be cutting the rug at grandma's house and
Hmm.
doing all kind of stuff at auntie's house. But if the parent, turns a blind eye to it, they're not going to believe what you say anyway.
Hmm.
So sometimes it actually takes an outside source, not family, not close friends, because
Hmm.
they think you're just being some kind of way.
Hmm.
So it may take the school or that child being expelled from school or getting kicked out of school. And now the parent is kind of, embarrassed, and
Hmm.
feeling a certain type of way. And now it's to a point where they have to do something.
Hmm.
So to be honest, it could be very hard to break the ice. But if you are attempting to break the ice, I would say you just have to just ask the question. Sometimes we have to ask the hard questions. Sometimes we have to say the obvious things that sometimes we don't want to say. We
Hmm.
have to just say, listen, little Johnny, have you noticed this in little Johnny? He
Hmm.
has a hard time sitting down. He just getting mad all of a sudden. He just doing all kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Have you noticed that? And if the parents say, well, no, I hadn't noticed it. Okay, well, I just, was asking,
Hmm.
and then maybe come back to it at a later time
Hmm. Hmm.
when little Johnny come up again.
Hmm.
Because sometimes you have to address it when it's happening right then.
Uh-huh.
Because if you come back 2 or 3 days later, the parent may not remember.
Amnesia. Just
By
forgot.
choice,
Yeah.
selective,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
And so if you address it, if little Johnny cutting up right then, and you say, hey, why can't he sit down? What's his problem?
Hmm.
Why is he all over the place? All the other kids are playing the game, but he is running all through the house. And we told him to sit down 5 times, and he still can't sit down. Have you seen this before? What do you think? Does he do this at school?
Hmm.
It's asking those questions,
Hmm.
especially when he's doing it, and then maybe even showing them, look at your little Johnny. Why he can't sit down? And sometimes you have to bring it to their attention
Uh-huh.
so they can know. Oh man, maybe I didn't notice it, or maybe I didn't see it like that. I just thought he was just being a 3-year-old,
Yes.
and
Yes.
he's not really being a 3-year-old. He
Yeah.
might have some problems with inattention and impulsivity, hyperactive,
Hmm.
which is not a normal hyperactive because we know 3-year-olds,
Hmm.
3-year-olds, but it could be a little bit extreme.
Yes.
So sometimes just showing them the behavior in that moment can help them see it.
Hmm.
And then they might be like, oh, okay, maybe I do need to kind of get some help. They might go to the doctor and say, let me see what the doctor say. Or they might say, let me go talk to the school counselor. Or they
Hmm.
might say, if they're in sports or if they're involved in any type of after school extracurricular activities,
Hmm.
then they might say, well, let me see what his coach is saying, or let me see what
Hmm.
they say when he goes to the Boys and Girls Club in the afternoon. how's his behavior there? So sometimes just pointing it out to the parent kind of helps them see it,
Yes.
especially if they're not receiving it at first.
I see. I see. Or as Mike could say, well, let me open up all them letters I got from the school
Exactly.
and see what they was
See
talking
what they were
about.
talking about.
Yeah, because sometimes I've talked with some people from in the school system who says that some parents actually don't respond to the communication from the school.
They don't.
And in fact, recently, some of them told me that some parents, and maybe not talking about our audience,
Right.
but some parents have actually blocked the school because they don't want to get the call from the school,
Absolutely.
even on their phones.
Yep.
And so they don't want that communication from the school. So that's a bad scenario. But bringing awareness is one of the main things before you can fix a problem. You got to be
Right.
aware that there is one.
Absolutely.
Aware that there is one, and
Right.
sometimes people don't know what's normal and what's not,
They don't.
especially when they're new to raising children.
Exactly.
And that's another thing that I know that the Bible teaches about aged women raising or teaching the young women how to love their children.
Right.
And sometimes parents think that I love my child because I birthed them.
Right. Yeah.
And the reality is, there is some duties in that love,
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
why a more seasoned person actually has to help a person that's coming along to help them
Absolutely.
know, yeah, baby,
But
this is actually the way you need to handle that.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
I totally agree because sometimes what happens is, just in my experience of working with, I guess within the last few years, a lot of our parents of our clients, they're much younger. And a lot of them are willing to enable the children to act any kind of way. And you hear it, you might have a 14-year-old that's on probation. And I'm trying to figure out, well, why you got a 14-year-old on probation? But come to hear about it, this behavior started when they were 4 or 5 because mom said, oh, that was cute. Oh, I'm going to let him do whatever. And now he's 14 and he still want to do whatever.
It ain't cute no more.
It ain't cute no more. And so now we got a whole issue. And so like it's bringing that awareness. You know, what is actually going on? What does the behavior look like? And it's just helping them understand that while they're your child, you still have to have structure. You still have to show positive reinforcement. You still have to say, listen, this is not going to work. What are your options? Like, this is what I stand for. This is what we're going to do. And if not, these are the consequences. And so all of that has to be in place in order for proper parenting, all the stuff that works for us to be functional in life.
Yes.
All that has to be in place from the
Yes.
parent standpoint first to pass along to our children.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Because I've actually noticed how that a person can actually have a mental disorder, but the way that person is treated from their youth up can be the difference between one person is treated with discipline
Right.
with a mental disorder, and then the other person is allowed just to go their own way.
Own way, yeah.
With that same mental disorder, there are going to be two different outcomes.
Absolutely.
There's going to be two different outcomes.
Absolutely.
Because the mental disorder does not automatically determine the end of that child.
Exactly.
There can be a functional and then there's non-functional.
Exactly.
Well, wait a minute. I'm getting in your thought.
That's all right. That's all right. But you're absolutely correct. It can be a functional or dysfunctional.
Yes, yes.
So sometimes with the dysfunction, it just shows up where they've been enabled. And
Yes.
you cannot, well, this person has this diagnosis or
Yes.
this person has this disorder. And, well, let them do whatever because, no, if they can hear, read, talk, walk, they can follow directions. They can follow what they need to do. And if they're not going to do that, then they have to have consequences, just like somebody who doesn't have a disorder.
Yes.
So, because even with the disorder, the fact of the matter is, we have to talk about reality. The world may not know you have a disorder.
Right.
When I go to the grocery store, and just because I have bipolar, I know it, and the people around me may know it, but the cashier may not know I have bipolar. So if I just decide to just go off all of a sudden, it's going to look strange to the cashier. But my family may know how to handle it, but I have to learn that I can't do that. I have to know my triggers. I have to know why I'm getting upset. I need to do, what am I going to do when somebody makes me upset? Am I going to walk away? Am I going to be quiet? I'm going to go sit in the car while this person is in the store. What am I going to do? Because I have to be able to manage still and be functional instead of dysfunctional just because I have a mental diagnosis.
Right.
We have to be as healthy as we possibly can be, even with a disorder.
Yes.
And there's a way to do it. So that's why we have awareness and we want to educate, you want to learn about what the diagnosis consists of. Otherwise, it's going to be dysfunctional.
Yes.
Has no choice.
Yes. And the reality of it is the love ought to allow, sometimes people don't understand love in a family.
Right.
And some people believe that love in a family says that you just allow whatever.
Right.
However, true love will not allow you to see one of your family members about to go off a cliff.
Right.
And you know the end of that, and you just don't say anything.
Anything. Right.
And when you can help them to avoid that.
Exactly.
But then you don't say anything, and you just
Right.
try to smooth it over when you actually could have helped for
Help
real.
them. Yeah.
And that's true love. Sometimes is that tough conversation, and it doesn't make you feel good all the time.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it's not about feeling good all the time. One of the, I just don't know that I would have been well served if my mother didn't discipline me.
Right.
And I don't know, with the way I was coming along, I had a discipline problem. What I'm saying, I had anger issues,
Right.
and I don't know if somebody would have diagnosed me with something.
Right. Right.
But I do appreciate the discipline that I received that helped me to know that if you do certain things, there's
Right.
going to be consequences for those certain things.
Absolutely.
So even now as a man, I know that I can't let my emotions run away with me.
Exactly.
And some people, they've never been trained mentally to know that there are consequences for actions.
Exactly.
And so, like you were saying a little earlier, that when you're dealing with little Johnny, I don't know, we just might have to keep little Johnny on up till you get big Johnny.
Yeah.
But you got to deal with little Johnny when he little.
Exactly.
Because it's almost like a tree. It's almost like a tree. You see it going to the left.
Right.
Or going to the right, whichever way.
Whichever way.
Whichever way.
Yeah.
It's leaning and it's not straight.
Not straight.
What you've got to do when it's just a sapling, you got to try to straighten it
back
up.
up. Yeah.
Because if it grow this way, it's going to be that way.
Right. Yeah.
But when you see it going that way that it ought not go, then you've got to try to put some lines on it
Right.
to straighten
Straighten
it
it
up
up.
as much as
It's
you
gonna
can
be
possibly
harder.
do.
Yeah.
Because after it go that way, it's going to be hard to twist it
Absolutely.
and make it go in a way that it ought to go.
Absolutely. And I think that's where it comes down to one of the dues of the family.
Yes.
When it comes to mental health, is just making sure you're not going to have judgment, but you want to bring to the forefront, hey, did you notice yourself doing this? Or this is what I observed you doing. What are your thoughts on it? Do you think that's okay? Do you think it's right? You know, how would you react if somebody else did that to you? And just kind of asking those questions.
Yes.
You want to know their thought process, because sometimes individuals with mental health disorders, they sometimes they don't have awareness, but a lot of them do. They just kind of play on those mental health disorders. They just kind of work with it. They use it as a crutch. But you want to bring it to their attention to say, hey, how can I help? Do you see this is not normal? Do you see this is something you need to work on? And do you see this, how it's affecting you? And get their thought process so they can straighten up themselves too.
Yes.
You know, because it's a lot when you're dealing with, it's just you trying to straighten them up, and they don't know they need to straighten up. So the awareness has to be for them to understand that, hey, I need to do things differently too, so I can be straighter.
Yes.
And I'm here to help you, and the family member is there to help them. I'm here to help you straighten up too, but I can't do it by myself. So sometimes just asking those questions, have you seen your behavior? Have you noticed how you do things, how you act, or otherwise? It's just, it's not going to work. But that's one thing the family can do to show that love.
Mm-hmm.
As we're talking about love and being supported, show that love by helping them understand what you see.
Mm-hmm.
Bring it to their awareness because sometimes they just don't have it.
And that's the person with the mental disorder.
Yes.
Yes, yes. So now little Johnny has gotten older now,
Mhm.
and now little Johnny is Big Johnny,
Mhm.
and still in the family though. Because
Mhm.
here's one thing about the family: the everybody in the family.
Yep.
You born in the family, you gonna
Yep.
die in the family.
Yep.
And sometimes people are this the black sheep or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, you're
That's
still in
your
the
uncle,
family.
that's your
Exactly.
cousin,
Uh huh.
that's your son, that's your daughter. It
Absolutely.
don't make no difference about
Mm-mm.
what they do to embarrass you. That's yours.
Yours.
Period.
Right. Claim them or not, they still yours.
They're yours.
Yep.
They're yours. So now they're an adult,
Mhm.
and they are exhibiting these different and sometimes maybe they didn't grow up. Maybe we can deal with two scenarios.
Okay.
One scenario is they were little exhibiting these behaviors,
Mhm.
and they've grown up, and
Mhm.
now it's an adult that's acting out.
Mhm.
Um, what are some of the do's and don'ts in that scenario? They're maybe not under the parents' control now. Now
Mhm.
they're on their own if they can be,
Right.
but they're an adult. They're not a little
Mhm.
boy or little girl. What are some of the do's and don'ts in that scenario?
Okay. So yeah, I think a lot of the do's and don'ts do pertain to adults because when dealing with minors and children, of course the parent is always in charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with adult situations and just being mindful that sometimes some mental disorders they are onset in adulthood. They start once they
So they
become an
didn't
adult.
manifest when they was.
When they were younger,
I see.
they manifested after the age of 18.
I see.
So that is something, you have to be mindful of that, and the person may not even recognize or anything. But in dealing with the adult, I think one of the main do's is just being supportive,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when I say being supportive, I mean just being there for them,
Mm-hmm.
letting them know you still love them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you need me to do, I'm here to do that, right? Also, you just want to make sure they understand where you stand with them as the adult.
Mm-hmm.
So, say for instance, you have an adult child living in the home with you,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just, seem like they just kind of, just kind of losing it on edge, kind of doing a lot of different things that just don't seem normal.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to sit that adult child down,
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, this is what I see. If you're going to, I'm here to help you get some help, provide you with resources. If you're not going to get help, these are your options.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's I need you to go to a day program during the daytime. I need you to get a job where you can work, bag groceries, or do something. I need for you to be a little bit more stable than what you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
So just sharing with them what your ultimatum, almost like an ultimatum is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in regards to them getting help
Mm-hmm.
and being better and doing things differently. So you have to just let them know, hey, this is where we are. I'm here to help you, but I also need this from you.
So it sounds like one of the things that you would put in that conversation
Hmm.
is firm, be firm,
Yes,
provide some hope,
yes,
and give some options,
absolutely.
and do some of the thinking that will help that conversation prior to having the conversation,
Hmm.
and give some options, some hope,
Hmm.
but be firm.
Be firm. You absolutely have to be firm because they're adults, right?
Yes.
So they adults, we want to do what we want to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that adult is going to try to do what they want to do, and sometimes if they know they have a mental disorder, they're going to play on that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't do this. Well, I can't work. Well, I can't do this. Well, let me help you find some employment.
Mm-hmm.
Even if that's taking off time, say, hey, I'll take this day off, this day off. We'll go around to some places. We'll fill out applications. We'll do this. We'll get you started. I will
Mm-hmm.
do my part. But you have to be firm for them to know that you mean it.
Mm-hmm.
Or otherwise, it's just going to be a cycle of the
Yes.
same thing. So you absolutely have to be firm.
Okay, very good.
Hmm.
Okay, so like you said, sometimes a situation on set it comes to reality at around 18.
Hmm.
Uh, so what about the impact of drug use that causes a mental situation?
So,
How would you manage that?
okay. So most of the times with drug use, of course, it heightens the symptoms of any mental disorder.
Hmm.
So if you say a client is diagnosed with depression,
Hmm.
the drug use is just going to heighten that feeling of being depressed, not wanting to do anything. If they have bipolar, they might be a little bit more manic,
Hmm.
more keyed up, more restless. It just heightens, drug use heightens the symptoms of
Hmm.
any mental disorder.
Hmm.
So with drug use, a lot of times in dealing with that, it's always recommended that the client will go to rehab. They have to be treated for the drugs first before treating the mental disorder. Because the substance use is a comorbidity, which is just that co occurring thing along with the mental disorder.
Hmm.
So it's just, you may not see true symptoms of the diagnosis, but you know the diagnosis is there. You
Hmm.
know the symptoms are there. But the substance use heightens it. So
Hmm.
in dealing with that, you have to address the substance use.
Hmm.
Period, hands down. And you always want to encourage them, of course, not to use substances. If it's depending on the severity of the substance use, they might be ordered to go to rehab. They may be ordered to do drug classes for a while, completely, withdraw and detox from the substance before even touching the mental disorder. Because it's just the way it works. Sometimes you can't see the true symptoms, so you
Yes.
have to make sure that the drug use is addressed most times first.
Yes.
Then we'll focus on the mental. And so it absolutely has to be addressed because it affects just that whole idea of the mental disorders.
Yes, and what I would understand is that uh, the mental disorder can be just baseline
Hmm.
a chemical disorder. Baseline your mental disorder could be a chemical imbalance.
Absolutely.
Now, if you put substance in on that, then your imbalance is not the normal imbalance.
Right.
It's part of the substance that's
Hmm.
carrying you in another direction.
Absolutely.
So then, in order to come to the right place, you
Hmm.
got to come back to your baseline
Baseline.
off of the drugs, which is
Absolutely.
actually impacting your chemical imbalance
Hmm.
as well.
Absolutely.
So you've got to get to where you have your true chemical imbalance.
Hmm.
Then they can assess where people who would prescribe or the
Right.
psychiatrist or
Hmm.
whoever that would diagnose, they might be able to prescribe something that can bring you in balance
Right.
so that you
Right.
can be functioning.
Functioning, yes.
Functioning.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. So you have to get you back to that baseline.
Hmm.
So because a lot of individuals who do take drugs, sometimes it is because they're dealing with the mental
And
illness.
they're trying to self
They're
medicate.
trying to self-medicate. So I
Hmm.
want to I want to use this, it mellows me out, or
Hmm.
it helps my anxiety, but it's not really helping your anxiety. It's just kind of making it a little bit more intense than more than it would. And so you might have more paranoia, you might be more worried, but they're like, oh, I'm mellow. No, not really. You're a little
Hmm.
bit impaired, but
Hmm.
we understand where you're coming from.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, definitely, helping people understand that the substance use is the not the answer,
Hmm.
but a lot of people choose that because they don't want to be on psychotropic medication. They're like, it just messed me up. Well, not really. It's just going to help you manage your symptoms and balance your chemical imbalance. But
Hmm.
they don't really understand that. So you definitely have to address it to get it back to that baseline, as you were saying.
Yes,
Yeah.
very good. So I think we've talked about some of the do's.
Hmm.
Well, what was some of the? Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that.
So
Don't do that.
one of the main don't do that don'ts is just do not try to force them into any type of treatment or getting services or getting help,
Hmm.
because especially with adults, because what happened is they're going to be resistant. I don't need it. I don't want it. My mom want me to have services. And it's like, okay, and they're an adult. So we have to have the adults consent. And if they don't consent, it's nothing we can do. So it would just be best to encourage
Mm-hmm.
the one with the mental diagnosis, the adult with the mental diagnosis, to seek help
Mm-hmm.
and provide that support instead of forcing them. Just do not force them into services. It makes it worse. It makes it hard for the therapist. It makes it hard for the client. It just makes it hard all the way around. It's not effective. It's not effective
Say, why
treatment.
are you here? Well, my mama told me to be here.
Exactly.
Then they
Yep.
got an attitude all the
And
time,
all the
and then they got
time.
resentment,
Absolutely.
and
It's
just
just
causing
horrible.
problems.
Absolutely. And they don't know why they there. And it's like,
I don't know. I'm fine.
right. Don't have no issues. I don't know why my mama signed me up for therapy. She want me to do it. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just don't force them into treatment. That's just like the biggest one. Because we deal with it all the time at the agency that I work with. We get referrals from parents.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, well, my son or my daughter, I want them to have services. And so, but we let them know, hey, we have to call them because they're 18, 19, 20.
Yeah.
You can't give consent.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll call them when they finally answer the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be like, well, I don't need therapy. We was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, your mom gave us a referral. No, I don't need therapy. I don't want therapy. And that's all we can do.
Mm-hmm.
We can't, and we have to call mom back and say, hey, we tried to reach out. He said he didn't want therapy. And so mom is upset because she thinks he should have therapy.
Mm-hmm.
He or she should have therapy. And it's like, well, ma'am, there's nothing we can do
Mm-hmm.
because he has to consent. That adult client with a mental disorder has to consent. And if they don't consent, it's just nothing we can do. So I think that's the biggest don't.
Mm-hmm.
Just do not force them in services. And then another one is just don't be judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
If they have a mental diagnosis or you notice that they're not quite as functional and don't seem as normal as what we would deem normal, just help them.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be judgmental. Don't blame them. Don't shame them. Don't make them feel bad.
Yes.
Help them.
Yes.
Help them.
Here's something I want to say about that. So you have a child. Uh, so now we're talking about now they're an adult. But say you have this person and their legs were broken, and then they go to get up, but they can't stand up. What would you do?
You will help them out.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've got a person that's got this disorder, and they're trying to function.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't. So the person that's got the broken legs, you wouldn't criticize them. Say,
No.
well, why you can't stand on your own 2 feet?
Right. Right.
You kind of
Right.
know why.
Yeah.
And it's obvious and it's physical.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I'm saying is because sometimes I think that because it's like it's two-tiered.
Right.
Like we understand physical stuff, but
Yeah,
mental stuff
mental stuff
is like
is-
we don't make the connection.
Right. Yeah.
We make a connection when we see somebody with broke legs.
Yeah.
We'll understand they're not going to be able to stand on their own
Right.
2 feet.
And we're willing to help.
And we're going to help them. And, we need to help them with certain things. And even physically, we know we need to, help pick them up and
Right.
certain things like that. So, and then I've also noticed with physical things, I got high blood pressure, my insulin ain't right, and so I have diabetes.
Right.
And so we would say, okay, well, let me go get your blood pressure medicine. Let me go get your insulin or this
Absolutely.
thing. But then when it come down to the mind, and they need mind help,
Right. Just yeah.
and sometimes the mind help going to turn to some physical things you may have to do for that person too, or they may need a certain medicine
Exactly.
for their mind, and it's a stigma to that.
It is a stigma to
Yeah.
it. I'm reminded of a lady that went to our church at one point in time. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Of course, we were having testimony service, and she wanted to testify. It was just what she wanted to do, It was testimony time. So she would get up and say some very unusual, and when I say unusual, I mean unusual things. And so, it will make us think, but those of us that knew where she was, it was like, okay, we just gonna help her sit down. We just don't, we ain't gonna send her out to church. We're not
Yes.
scared of her.
Yes.
But we're going to help her, finish her testimony.
Yes.
So we can move on in the service. And so after, she might get up and sing a solo, do very well singing the solo. But it wasn't time to talk, so she did okay. But just not shaming her. Even when we saw her at family functions, it's like, let's treat this person the same. We know what their issue is, but let's treat them the same.
Exactly.
Because it goes back to the love,
Yes.
right? Showing love, making sure we're making everyone feel loved and
Yes.
being kind to people. Because regardless to what the issue is, we don't want to make anyone feel like they're just nothing, right?
Right.
So we have to just make sure, we know you got this issue, but we're going to treat you the same.
Right. We don't want to make somebody feel like they're nothing because we don't want to feel like we're nothing.
Right.
And the reality of it is that we're actually supposed to treat other people the way we want to be treated.
Absolutely.
And here's the other thing. Even in the church, in the scriptures, Paul taught the people, I think it was in Thessalonica, he told them, he says, comfort the feeble-minded
Absolutely.
and support the weak.
Support the weak.
And because there were people who did not have strong minds.
Absolutely.
And
Right.
we have some among us
We do.
that they don't have strong minds, and we need to be, how do I say it? Well, like you said, we need to treat them appropriately
Right.
with love and kindness and care, and not look down upon them
Right.
because their mind is not as strong as yours.
Absolutely.
And here's the other thing: you got to be careful because your mind is strong today.
Right. I don't know how it's going to be tomorrow.
And you got to be careful.
Absolutely.
Your mind's strong today, but as you get older, how strong will your mind be as you age? You
Absolutely.
don't
You don't
know
know.
how that's going to go.
Absolutely.
Because there's other ailments that happens to the mind as you age, dementia and
Alzheimer's.
okay, timers. Because I say that wrong sometimes. But yes,
Yes.
you have those scenarios that you have to contend with, and so you've got to continue to treat people the way you want to be treated because
Right.
you don't know what position you're going to be
Gonna
in
be in.
before, and that's a family affair.
Absolutely.
Those are family affairs.
Absolutely.
Dementia, Alzheimer's,
All of that. Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's,
Yes.
Alzheimer's,
Yes.
Alzheimer's. They told me you just got to say something 40 times before you get it right. I think Alzheimer's. You just you don't know.
You just don't know. And I think also in what you were saying, thinking about treating them with respect as well.
Yes.
Just because their mind may not be as strong as mine, don't mean I disrespect.
Yes.
Always show respect.
Yes.
You want to be respectful, even if they're older than you, but you may have to guide them and lead them.
Yes.
Show that respect.
Yes.
Don't be disrespectful. Just be as kind as you possibly can be. Just don't shame them.
Yes.
Don't shame them. Don't blame them for their issues. Don't blame them and make them feel bad. We just want to always be in a way that we can show forth love to
Yes.
them.
Yes. Okay. You get tired. You get tired.
Yep.
Like some might say, plum tuckered, where you're just exhausted, and so you're dealing with this sometimes constantly. What are some of the what should you do when you have that loved one that's close to you, live with you, and they having this disorder? How do you manage your mental health in those scenarios?
Well, that's a good question because sometimes I think we get caught up in just making sure the next person is okay and we forget about ourselves. So self-care is very important. So self-care could be just taking a day to relax. It could be, let me go do something that I enjoy. It could be just taking out, this day, I'm going to, if the person needs that supervision, you can find a day program they can go to. Be in there all day, and while they're in there, I'm just going to be at home, relaxing. I'm not going to clean, not going to cook, not going to answer the phone. I'm just going to sit and do nothing. And then that kind of relaxes your mind. You always want to do that self-care for yourself. Whatever you do to meditate, if it's praying, if it's reading your word, if it's just however other people may meditate, do that. Do something you enjoy. That's going to be important to always remember what you enjoy. If it's talking to somebody on the phone you ain't talked to in a long time, if it's saying, hey, let's go for lunch, and take all the time you need to go eat lunch, do that. So
Mm-hmm.
you want to remember to do self care
Mm-hmm.
because when you're caring, being a caretaker, caregiver for someone, it's so easy to just kind of lose yourself
Yes.
in caretaking and caregiving, and then the next thing you know, you can't think of
You
nothing.
having an episode, you
Yeah,
having an issue, you
yeah,
having a crisis, and
exactly.
somebody coming to see about you.
Coming to see about you, and so it'd be both of y'all that need the caretaker. So we want to
Yes.
make sure there is self care in place for yourself always.
Yes.
Have to have self care, whatever that looks like for you. Self care is so important to help maintain your mental wellness, your
Mm-hmm.
mental health. If you feel like you just kind of feel like you're about to go off on the deep end,
Mm-hmm.
call somebody and say, hey, I need to talk or I need a break. Can you come to the house and sit with this person or be here while I go take a little small break
Mm-hmm.
or whatever I need to do to make sure I'm mentally well,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm healthy mentally,
Mm-hmm.
emotionally. I'm able to be able, when I come back in the home from taking my little break, I'm able to deal with whatever I may have to deal with when I'm in my home environment.
Yes.
So just being mindful of, and sometimes it's just good to just take a list. Like, what do I like to do?
Yes.
What do I like to do?
Yes.
What do I enjoy?
Mm-hmm.
What foods do I like?
Mm-hmm.
What do I like to listen to?
Mm-hmm.
What music make me feel good? You
Mm-hmm.
know, where do I like? Do I like to ride in my car and just ride up the road when there's not a lot of traffic? Do I just like to take a road trip?
Mm-hmm.
Can I take a day road trip? Can I just go leave early one morning and just come back by 2 o'clock
Mm-hmm.
and be at home? Can I get somebody to sit right there with this person for an hour, 2 hours, 8 hours, and I take this little break? Can I go? Let me go to the hotel down the street. They built it. Let me go see what it look like.
Mm-hmm.
Take some time for yourself. Go to the spa. Go get your, go relax. Go get a massage.
Yes.
Enjoy
Yes.
yourself. Don't forget what you like to do in
Yes.
that process.
Yes.
That way you can provide what that person is needing.
Yes.
Because if you get too caught up in that, you won't be able to help them. So you want to be able to still give the care that that person needs.
Yes. So one of the things I just thought about is
Hmm.
how that you can't run on empty.
No, you cannot.
You can't run on empty, and you need to refuel and
Refuel.
recharge.
Hmm.
And one of the things that you have to have in those scenarios where you're dealing with a loved one with a mental uh, illness is long suffering.
Absolutely.
So to help you to come to the place where you can continue in that long suffering,
Hmm.
you may need to do some of those things where you go recharge,
Absolutely.
fuel up your long suffering
Hmm.
gas tank, so that
Absolutely.
when you go back,
You
you can
can,
treat that person with the
right.
love, with the respect,
Hmm.
and all of that,
Right.
and not lose who you are,
Exactly.
not lose
Yeah.
who you are. That so many people, they care about the other person, they
Hmm.
love the other person,
Hmm.
but in the process, they don't care enough about themselves,
Hmm.
and then they lose the ability to care for others.
Right. Yeah. And what happens is they end up, the one they were caring for have to go somewhere else, or they
Yes.
have to be provided care from another person,
Yes.
and now you're concerned about their well-being, and
Mm-hmm.
it could become too much. So like you
Mm-hmm.
said, just always, recharging.
Mm-hmm.
You can't run on empty, as you said.
Yes.
You have to recharge.
Mm-hmm.
When you feel yourself going on empty, listen, go by just stop, recharge,
Mm-hmm.
get some more strength,
Mm-hmm.
get some more oomph so you can keep going
Yes.
for the betterment of everybody around you.
Right.
Yourself first, and then everybody else. Because when you don't recharge, it starts showing up as irritability. You're getting upset,
Mm-hmm.
snappy.
Yes.
I'm tired, or I'm stressed, or it shows up in many different ways. Then it
Mm-hmm.
shows up in your physical body. You might be sick. You might feel pain here or ache there that may not be related to age, but it may be something else.
Mm-hmm.
So just making sure you are recharging is so important.
Yes. Very
Hmm.
good. Very good. Let me see. Can you give me a scenario of
Hmm.
a success story? Um, you know, you can redact the names and all of that.
Okay.
Can you give me a scenario of a success story where the family, it was a family scenario, and the therapy was able to be applied and the help was received and a good outcome.
Okay. So yeah, I actually had a client. I think she was about 8 or 9 when I started working with her, and she discharged when she was a freshman, I believe, in high school.
Hmm.
So I worked with her a few years, all through COVID. We worked together, but when she discharged, she was doing very well. But when I first started working with her, she had a lot of attention deficit hyperactive disorder symptoms, which is like the impulsivity, hard time concentrating, very distracted, very unfocused. She had trauma due to sexual abuse, and she had some issues with mom because mom blamed her for everything. Anything that happened to her, the girl, my client, mom blamed the client for whatever happened. So as we moved throughout, it was myself and another therapist. We worked with her on the therapy portion and just helping her to become more focused, doing better in school, helping her with her behavior. Um, she was better even with the sexual abuse. She wasn't so promiscuous. She was able to say, "I'm not feeling safe when the things are happening." So she was, by the time we finished, uh, well, by the time she discharged there, because it's always recommended for them to continue.
Hmm.
But by the time she discharged, she was more focused. She could concentrate on her work. She was able to share with mom because it just seemed like she was a little bit scared of talking to mom. But one of the main highlights of it was being able to help mom to understand what the child needed to be successful.
Hmm.
And one of the things we had to have a hard conversation, and because I was the therapist on the case, I had to have those hard conversations with mom about this is what she's feeling unsafe. This is what we need to do. Um, and we ended up having to file a defects report because of the sexual abuse. But mom was able to understand what she needed to do. And by the time, she discharged, mom was very open to her. She was trying to make sure she had things for school. She was trying to make sure she succeeded. She had her in homeschool because she wanted her to do well. She didn't want her to be distracted, by other little things that she was getting in trouble with all the time. And she was doing well in school. And she had her in some extracurricular activities. So mom had improved and the client had improved.
Hmm.
So I consider that a success story because both of them,
Hmm.
it took a little bit of work, quite a bit of talking,
Yes.
quite a bit of hours, hey, kind of going over. Sometimes it can be redundant because we're
Hmm.
going over the same thing week to week because you didn't accomplish it this week, and now we're back here going over the same exact thing, but that's okay.
Hmm.
Because if we have to go over it all those times for you to get it, that's what we're going to do.
Hmm.
So that was a success story, and she should be graduated from high school, I believe, this year.
Wonderful.
So she's doing really good. She's doing really well. Mom is being able to maintain and do what she needed to do in the home. So
Hmm.
that was like, I believe that was my greatest success story in
It's
working
good.
with the clients I've worked with over the years.
It's good. Good.
Hmm.
Good. Uh, you got a horror story? We probably should have
Oh
started with
Lord.
that.
I mean, I do have a horror story. It's never a
To
dull
get your
moment.
list.
It's never a dull moment. Well, I think one, I was never too shaken by
Hmm.
any
Hmm.
um, client because I just felt like if they were assigned to me, I had an assignment to do.
Yes.
So once I went out to do that assignment, if it just wasn't going to work, then I had to go ahead and move on. I think my most horrible horror story would be had a client that she had experienced quite a bit of trauma
Hmm.
from her biological parents, but she was living with, grandparents, and she was a rather large young lady. She
Hmm.
was only 9, but she was about my height, and she was a little bit bigger than me. So, even in doing the assessment, we didn't even hardly get past the assessment portion because she started crawling towards me. And so I was really concerned, and I was like, "Oh, okay, well, we're gonna chop it up, and then we're gonna go back for our session." So we went back for the session. It was a little difficult to get through to her. And so I said, well, maybe I'm not the one for this particular client. So, asked for some assistance. But I think that she could have been successful. It just wasn't. I wasn't the person. And
Yes.
so, I never like to feel fearful when helping someone. I
Okay.
feel like if
Oh,
I'm
you thought it might be physical.
yeah,
Oh,
so
I
I
see.
thought it might be physical, and I
You
really,
crawling towards you. I didn't understand that.
yeah,
Okay.
so it was more physical. But like horror stories, as far as like the therapy process, I think I don't really have horror stories, but sometimes there are clients that are not receptive. They kind of tend to want to stay where they are, and I have to understand that sometimes people don't want the help because it allows them to stay in a place where it just allows them to either complain or be complacent, don't really want to move forward. I remember an adult client, she had quite a few issues, but I would always give her some type of solution, and she always found an excuse to not do that. And so I said, well, I'm here to help. We can go through all the resources. I'm here for you. She was receptive to the therapy part, but when it came to like case management and finding housing, jobs, and allowing her kids to kind of grow up and let them take time with their dad because they were young men. I was like, well, they need to spend a lot. They need to spend time with their father. They're going to they're always your children, but let them spend a little bit more time with their dad. That was just a no-go. Very resistant. Did not want to too much do anything when it came to the process of really, really moving forward and becoming functional
Yes.
in society. It was just like, no, I'll just stay right here. And so I said, well, I'll meet you where you are. I'm gonna keep trying. So eventually, she decided that she didn't want services anymore, and eventually discharged. But I think that was one of my harder cases, where I don't think I've ever dealt with anyone that was just quite that resistant. So she was pretty resistant, and I was like, oh wow, I just really don't think she wants to change. I kind of think she want to just stay there. So it was it took me back a little bit. I was like, okay, well,
I kind of
okay,
understand where you're coming from. You kind of want to help everybody, and then
everybody,
when you see somebody that looks like you're not going to be able to help, it kind of makes you feel a certain
yeah,
kind of way.
yeah. So
I do really appreciate you coming and
thank you so much for having me.
helping to start this conversation,
Oh
really,
yes,
because I don't think it's finished. But I
oh
think
no,
this is the beginning of a conversation that some families need to start having. We should not ignore mental illness
right,
amongst our family members.
exactly.
We should not ignore because ignoring those things don't go away.
They don't go away.
If you don't, you may find that the whole family dynamic is strained because we've tried to ignore
Exactly.
things that we should have addressed. And by addressing things, we could make things better. May not make it uh, altogether some other person scenario normal.
Right.
We may not come to where everything is where we exactly want it to be, but we can make it work,
Exactly.
manage,
Manage.
and make things better like you do with other healthcare issues. You have to manage your
Manage.
healthcare. And so we
Absolutely.
have to manage our mental health. And even as we're caring for others, we need to manage our mental health as well as others.
Absolutely.
Would you like to have any closing remarks?
Well, I just agree. Want to say thank you for having me, and I agree. The conversation has to keep going. I would say, especially in the Black community, we just kind of okay, don't we're not gonna talk about that. That person's just a little different. But now let's say how this person is a little bit different. Educate ourselves. We got Google for everything, right? So educate yourself. Buy the DSM-5, which is our diagnosis book. Read up on the diagnosis. Read what they look like. This is what the psychiatrists use to diagnose people. So read them. What are the symptoms? What does it look like? Do I see anybody with this? Is this abnormal? I think at some point we may all feel a little depressed. We may feel a little sad because we experience things in life.
Mm-hmm.
We may have a little anxiety when we got to go speak somewhere. We may have a little anxiety when we got to take a large test.
Right.
But we have to remember that the difference between what's normal and the diagnosis or the disorder is how does it affect my functioning in everyday life.
Yes.
And if it's affecting my functioning to the point where it's just not working, then let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have the conversation.
Right.
And let's not be ashamed. Let's get the help we need.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I thank you for helping us
Sure.
with some awareness
Oh, yeah.
on the do's and don'ts of family mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you, Ms. Terica.
No problem.
Did I say that right?
Terica.
Terica.
That's okay.
I am so glad that you came to be with us today
Yes,
and to
thank you.
share what you've learned over the years to help us to do better.
All right,
To help
thank
us to
you.
do better. So thank you
I
very much.
appreciate it so much. Thank you.
All right. And we're glad that you've been with us, and we want you to come back and enjoy, like, share, subscribe, and I hope these talks will help you to grow and help your families to grow in grace. And we're glad that you're with us. And if you have a topic that you would like to hear us discuss or a question or concern, you may email us at ltgig podcast at gmail.com. One more time, ltgig podcast at gmail.com. And we invite you to come back next week and enjoy. Come on back. God bless you.